Thank you. That was wonderful. Good morning. Welcome to chapel today. This morning we're going to conclude our chapel series. It was a short series, Wednesday, Thursday, and today on perspectives in Latino faith. And we have been drawing upon the fact that this is National Hispanic Heritage Month. But we wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to educate, to inform, to broaden, to enlighten, and to share some thoughts and stories and experiences. And I think whenever we sing bilingually or multilingually, we enter into what we would call an Acts 2 moment, where those who had descended upon Jerusalem on that day of Pentecost, as the 120 were in prayer, and the Spirit of God came upon them and descended in tongues, that they would declare that we have heard the wonders of God declared in our own languages. And that's a beautiful thing to do. And so it's good every now and then to declare the wonders of God in another tongue, in another language. And so this morning, as we call it in Spanish, the language of heaven, la lengua del cielo. And so good morning, welcome. I'm going to introduce our speakers in just a moment, and as I do so, I just want to share a couple of thoughts. We're going to do this in a little different format this morning, and as we think about perspectives, I want you to look at this image. And this is an image I've used before in other presentations, but as we think in terms of perspectives, as we think in terms of the particular lenses that we bring to any given situation, whether it's an image or an encounter or a relationship, we oftentimes come with a predetermined set of presuppositions, assumptions, perhaps even biases or stereotypes or understandings about those who are outside of our own family or culture or particular world. And as you look at this image, it's kind of a Latin theme, right? I mean, so even in regards to the use of this particular picture, you'll notice that there is an older gentleman and there's an older woman in the image. But as you look closer, you begin to experience a change in perspective. You might see the young man with the guitar. You might see the young woman with the basket over her head. You might even see the señorita coming out of the one door there onto the side. And some of you have even seen the gold chalice in the center between the two images. But the purpose of our perspective series is to educate, as I said a moment ago. And that's one of the wonderful things we can do at a university such as Biola, where we can encounter one another. We can not only experience good teaching and education in the classroom, but one of the other advantages we have is the co-curriculum, student activities, clubs, and of course the chapel program. And so this morning, before I introduce our speakers, I wanted to share with you this verse from Psalm 139, verse 14, and I would like you, each of you, to read this out loud with me. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. Let's read that one more time. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. So as you think about this verse of Scripture from Psalm 139, personalize it. Think in terms of your own body, your own mind, your own soul, spirit, family, life, all that you are being God's handiwork, being an extension of God's creativity, and to think that God has in fact made you fearfully and wonderfully. This passage from the book of Acts is important when we want to understand God's work on a more global or even universal historical level. Paul in Athens writes and says these words, "The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands, and he is not served by human hands, but as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands." And so I use this verse this morning to draw attention, not just to the fact that each and every one of us individually is God's handiwork, But as we understand the mission of God globally, as we understand the kingdom universal, we realize that God is at work moving people here and there. According to statistics from the United Nations, over 200 million people worldwide are migrating at any given time. And so it's important for us to understand, not only have we all descended from one man, but that God has set our time and our place. And so for such a time as this, God has brought each and every one of us to Biola University with all of the individual stories and testimonies that make up our community. And so it's important for me to reinforce that each and every one of you has a testimony. Each and every one of you in this room this morning has a particular story. God has orchestrated for you to be at this university, and any one of you could be up here on this platform this morning. And so I want to introduce some members of our community who are going to be sharing their particular stories of how God has led them to Biola, how God has used their life and their culture and their family to inform their faith. And so if I can have Erica Sanchez join me at this time. Erica is an undergraduate sociology major. You get to sit right next to me. And it is wonderful to have Erica. She is also president of the Unidos Club this year, and so we are blessed to have Erica join us. Also, Luis and Jessica Barco, if you would join us here. Jessica is a graduate of Biola. She's also part of our undergraduate admissions staff. She is very much responsible for a lot of the work we do in various diverse communities. And Luis is an undergraduate business major. They are a married couple, which I think is important to understand, even going into this time. And Luis is also a youth pastor at his church, where also Jessica serves there in ministry. And so we're going to share this morning, and allow me to swing around if I can. Let's get this to Luis. Okay, who put the super glue on this here? Here we are, there we are. And Luis, why don't you start us out and just share what's on your heart this morning, and tell us who you are and what God is doing in your life, and go for it.
Good morning, buenos dias. Today, I was thinking what Bible verse can apply to my life. And the only one that came to my mind was Jeremiah 29, verse 11. So let me just read it to you. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." So basically, let me tell you a little bit of me. I come from Guatemala, and a small village from Guatemala. And my family moved out from that village when I was a little baby. So they moved to the city of Guatemala, where I spent about 17 years. So when I was 17, I emigrated to United States, to Santa Barbara, California, where I lived for 5 years. Then I moved to La Puente. Then I moved to Downey. Then I moved to Montebello. So I've been in many places. I was telling my wife that I didn't know how much I have emigrated from one place to another place until this time. But my childhood, it was very, very special. I come from a single parent home. My father wasn't there for me when I grew up, but something special in some of the Latin families is that whenever a parent is missing in home, you have a lot of aunts, a lot of uncles, and you might have some cousins who are there to support you, and they become your second parent, So that's what happened in my family. I still keep in touch with my family after 17 years of living here in the United States, and they are still calling me like El Niño Fernando, which is my second name. So I'm 35, but they still call me Niño. which is kid. So then part of my Hispanity is that I come from a Hispanic church where, Latino traditional church, they really don't encourage education. And imagine if your family, they also don't encourage education. What do you do in a university, or what do you do in college? I mean, basically you don't do much. But I remember being in this Latino traditional church, and what they encouraged me was do ministry. So when I was 22, I felt the calling to do ministry, and they sent me to this wonderful school. It's called Latin American Bible Institute, LABI, but it's not accredited. So I went there just to get prepared for doing ministry, and thank God God used my education from there. But then I realized that I needed to become educated, so I went to college, Cerritos, and then I transferred to Biola. So what I want to say is that I have seen God moving in my life throughout my entire life, since I was a little kid and until today. So basically that's all I'm going to share right now. I'm going to pass the mic to my wife.
Thank you. So you've all met my husband, Luis, and myself, and some of you might recognize me. I may have been your admissions counselor. I've been working at Biola for a little while now. I've been here for about 7 years as a student and working in the Office of Admissions, and it has been a great pleasure and it has been a great blessing to see just God, how God orchestrates everything, brings everything together, because He has a plan with you, because He has a plan with me, because He loves you. To share a little bit about myself, I want to point you to the verse that we just read, which is funny. That's the one that I'm thinking about. It's Psalm 139, but I wanted to expand it a little bit more to verse 13 through 16. And it's talking about how God created us in our mother's womb and that He knew you. And not only did He know you, but He planned every single day of your existence before any of them came to pass. So then sometimes you enter a difficult conversation with yourself where you say, wow, Lord, if you knew all these things about me, then why did you allow X, Y, Z thing to happen to me? So it becomes a little bit more complex than just saying, well, thank you, Lord, because I was beautiful and you made me. But it also comes into question, so this means that you've known me all along. To give you a little bit of context, I too am Latina and Mexican American. My husband is Guatemalan, and no, that's not the same thing. And we basically speak different languages completely. I remember when we first got married, Luis likes plátano frito. That's plantains with everything. And I said, that's crazy. That's like eating strawberries with meat. I can't eat fruit with meat. But with Luis, it all makes sense. When we first got married, he had Guatemalan things everywhere in our apartment. The bedspread was made of indigenous woven things, and he had his Guatemalan flag, and I'm like, we're going to have a conversation here. He's telling me that's not true. And I told him, one of these days, you're going to come home, and there's going to be a big Mexican flag plastered on the ceiling. And I was just kidding with him, but what I'm trying to tell you is, we're both Latino, but we are so different. We have different backgrounds, different cultures, and even in the midst of that, different upbringings, though similar. I also grew up in a single-parent home. My mom was left to raise 4 kids at the age of 29, which is crazy to me because I didn't get married till I'm 28, and I can't even imagine having a kid right now. I only have my cat. So my mom had 4 kids at my age, and she was raising us all by herself. So you can imagine there was a lot of experiences that I had, a lot of lack, a lot of need, a lot of challenges. But through that, I had a very hardworking mother who was leaving a legacy of a strong work ethic, of character, of dedication, of courage, of sacrifice, and teaching that to us. Now, I always knew that my mom wanted the best for me and for my siblings. That was never a question. She raised the 4 of us. It was my 2 brothers and my twin sister and I. Yes, I am a twin. And you guys may see her around every now and then. But she raised us, and that was what she taught me. She taught me what she knew how. It may not have been a higher education and telling me, you need to take your SAT at this time. You need to have this GPA. What do you want to be when you grow up? It may not have been that, but it was courage. And it was dedication. It was a strong work ethic. It was the value of sacrifice and not looking at that as an ugly or an unfortunate thing in life, but as a pathway and a brick that is laid down before you so that later you can take a step upon it. And that's how God works in our life. Many times I said, Lord, I want to know what it is to be a strong Mexican person and have that identity, be Mexican American. But how can I when part of that culture was stripped away from me? Growing up in a single parent home where my mom was working all the time, I hardly saw her during the day. Growing up as a latchkey kid with 4 of us at home all the time, how do you establish culture that way? It became a culture of survival. It became a culture of getting to that next place. And even then, I read the scriptures and it says that he made me fearfully and wonderfully, and he knew every single day before it would even come to pass. All that to say that the Lord has blessed me and has been redeeming everything. The family that was lost when my dad walked out, being scared, Lord, what's going to happen to me? And then seeing this wonderful young man that he puts next to me. To establish a new family, a cultural identity that was taken away. Being raised in a single-parent home with all your family far away in Mexico, no aunts and uncles to kiss you, no family to embrace you. And he gives me the church, an extended family. I grew up in a Latino church, but also the Latino church, higher education is not the priority, it's ministry. The end of the world is coming near, so ministry, that's what everyone needs to do. You know? Identity, God redeemed that as well. Authority, God redeemed that as well. In my walk with the Lord, I have been seeing how God has been redeeming everything to himself. God's plan and God's purpose is to redeem his entire creation to himself, but not only with the greatest gift of salvation, but redeeming you. Redeeming your culture. Redeeming your family. Redeeming your identity. Redeeming your intellect. Redeeming your authority, the voice that was lost. All of that comes together in Christ. And I'll tell you one thing, if there's a life verse that I have, is that he that began the good work in you will continue to establish it until the day that he comes. So I wait in the Lord, knowing that he's always known me, and knowing that though I've had challenges, and culture's been part of it, that every brick that has been laid has been part of the path that I've walked, and that's going to continue to lead me to where God has for me. And not only for me now, but with my husband.
I hope you guys don't mind. I'm scared of heights. So I was like, oh no, I'm sitting on a tall chair. So I'm just going to stand because I like the ground. But I want to read a verse that kind of highlights my journey with God. And I'm going to ask you to open up to Matthew 11, verse 28. And I'm going to start off by reading it. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When I read this last night, I was like, can you give me rest? I'm really tired. But it totally embodies my testimony with God. And in this chapter 11, John the Baptist is being held in prison. And he is hearing everything about Jesus. And he sends a messenger to find Jesus and to ask him, are you really the Messiah? Are you for real? And I relate a lot to John the Baptist. I might not have been in prison, but I feel like a lot of things in my life kept me from really seeing the glory of God early on in my life. A couple of those things were my family. I grew up in a Mexican home, traditional. I had a lot of cousins. I had a lot of family all the time. Every Sunday was a party day where you gathered as a family and you celebrated being a family. And weariness came from my family because I saw my dad struggle with alcohol. And it's a struggle today. It's hard every day when, like, if I'm home, I'm just waiting for that time when he gets home and I don't know what to expect. I don't know if it's gonna be a good day or if it's gonna be a bad day. I don't know if he's gonna be that funny drunk. I don't know if he's gonna be the one, the drunk that just goes to sleep right away. I don't ever know. And that causes a lot of weariness for me, just that worry in the back of my head all the time. Another thing is my ethnicity. I went to a private high school, mostly Caucasian, very wealthy people, and it was a burden to be boxed in, to be judged for my color. I was in a lot of AP classes, and I was mostly the only Mexican in the class. And to be the voice for the Mexican community is hard because I'm just one person, and they would ask me, what's your opinion on this since you're Mexican? What's your opinion as a white person? Like, I don't know. I could give you my opinion, but I don't know if it embodies everyone. Another awareness that came and allowed me to feel like in prison was my neighborhood. It was tough growing up. I am from Central Santa Ana, and just a few days ago, I read an article I was sharing with Pete, and this is what their first line was. Let me just read it. Some see the children of Santa Ana as a lost cause. They're gangbangers, they're high school dropouts, they're pregnant at 15, a drain on society. Some of my readers call me to vent. Others tell me they wouldn't dare cross into Santa Ana. It's too violent, too dirty, too full of Mexicans. This article was published in the OC Register on September 19. These are the labels that have been placed on me as a woman of Santa Ana, Mexican woman, and I felt like John the Baptist imprisoned and not knowing God's glory. And it wasn't until like John sent a messenger, and that message came to me through KidWorks. KidWorks is a nonprofit organization, and they were that messenger to me. They brought me the glory of God into my sight, and it's a funny story. I became involved with children's ministry, but I had no idea what I was teaching. I just knew they needed help, and I rose up to the occasion, and I decided I wanted to help with children's ministry. And as I started teaching the stories, I started learning them as a kid. I started learning it through the games, through the arts and crafts, and I started learning God's glory as a kid. And it just reminded me how, as a kid, I never really had a childhood because I had been kind of like John the Baptist, like far away from God's glory. And through his glory, he has brought me rest. There's not one day that goes by without me praying for my father. That hope is priceless in me now. That hope that came from Christ, that he will restore my family, it's priceless. I don't think I could have ever found that hope anywhere else. And in my ethnicity, I have found rest as well, knowing that God has created me in his image and that he's using me for his kingdom, that I'm going to be able to reach people that haven't been reached before because of the way I look, because of the way God has created me, because of my background, the things I've seen, the things I've been through. I'm going to be able to relate to those kids that go home to a drunk parent, maybe even two drunk parents. I'm going to be able to relate to those from a tough community. And in my neighborhood, I have seen hope. When I read that article, it kind of stabbed me a little bit. And I just said, no, they don't know KidWorks. They don't know the hope that comes out of there. They don't know the students that are there right now as in high school, like fighting to get to college, fighting to get to a better education. They don't know about it, and I just sometimes I felt like John the Baptist because I was in prison, and Jesus sent the word to come to me through a messenger, and it came to me, and it gave me rest. And it didn't just give me physical rest, it gave me actual rest in my heart, and it made everything in my life have a bigger purpose than what I thought it had. So I thank you for listening. That's all I have.
Thank you, Erica, Luis, and Jessica. The uniqueness about my particular testimony or story is that I am part of that generation that, as one scholar, Daniel Rodriguez, put it, lives in the hyphen. And what I mean by that is my great-grandparents migrated to the United States in the early 1920s. By way of Sonora, Mexico. Nogales was the city which actually straddled both the United States and Mexico. And at that time, my grandmother was the eldest of 9 children. My mother would be born here in the United States in Phoenix, Arizona. And then my family would move out from Phoenix, Arizona to the city of Los Angeles, where I was born. And so I grew up in a third-generation Mexican-American household, speaking English, learning middle-class values, being introduced to popular culture. My mother was determined to inform us, broaden us, educate us to the best of her ability in that regard. So I didn't grow up listening to Los Panchos or Banda or Tejano or any of that. I grew up listening to the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and the Beach Boys. And that was my world. And so when scholar Rodriguez mentions I am of that generation that lives in the hyphen, because of my culture, because of my geography, being here in Los Angeles all of my life, it is the most Mexican city outside of Mexico City in the world. It is, of course, a metropolis of many cultures, many languages, and many faiths, that God would foreordain that I be born in that town, in that time, and that ultimately, after high school, I would come to Christ as a result of an encounter with a street evangelist there in East Los Angeles. And this was at a time when the Jesus Revolution was in full bloom. It was not the South Orange County Calvary Chapel Maranatha movement of Chuck Smith, but rather it was the Latin style, the Latin version of that. And I was part of that street culture of kids that used drugs, that listened to music, that partied, and were basically lost. And so I give God all glory and all praise for His salvation. But when you are living on the hyphen, you sometimes feel that you are between cultures. I am neither exclusively Mexican because I don't speak Spanish, and I was never born in Mexico. I don't know any of my family in that regard. And at the same time, because of my looks or my geography or my heritage or my history, may not be fully embraced as American either. And so the Mexican American, or the American of Mexican descent, depending on which way you want to go, is separated by the hyphen, and that's my testimony, that's my story, that's where I live. Now, God has used that in a wonderful way, because God has given me an ability and a capacity to move freely within cultures and between cultures. And that has served me well, both as Associate Provost for Diversity Leadership of the last 8 years, and more recently now as Vice Provost for Faculty Development and University Academic Effectiveness. And so it is intended this morning to introduce you to a broad range of experiences, geography, background, nationality, ethnicity, and expression of faith, family composition. My father was killed when I was very young, so I was raised in a single-parent household as well. and to even draw attention to the fact that there are different college experiences. We are all happen to be first-generation college, attending the first in our families to go to college and to the university. And so in a very real way, we are the fountainhead of a heritage in our families now that will assume that education is simply the next part of the journey. And so I'm very proud to say that both my wife and daughter are graduates of Biola University. My son-in-law is a graduate of Biola University, and each of my 3 grandchildren will probably be graduates of Biola University sometime into the future. But we wanted to have this opportunity this morning to share these stories with you and to introduce you to multiple perspectives when it comes to this thing called Latin culture, Latin faith perspectives. At this time, I want to invite our worship team back to the front with us, and DNA is going to take home this chapel. We're going to conclude here with another song, and so I want you to just take these words to heart, to listen to these stories when you see each of these individuals on campus, to introduce yourself to them, affirm them, thank God for them, and as I said earlier, each and every one of you could be up here too, because your story, your testimony, the journey that God has led you to this university with is just as wonderful. So thank you for being attentive this morning. Thank you for being here with us. God bless you. Let's worship the Lord. Let's stand together as we close.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.